Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to my channel. So last day we were doing the first literary period, that is the Old English period or the Anglo-Saxon period. So last day we discussed about the origin of English language, the two types of poetry, that is the pagan poetry and the religious poetry. We discussed the pagan poetry in details with the detailed description of Beowulf. So today we'll start discussing the religious poetry. Religious poetry is also known as Old English Christian poetry. So we will discuss how the Christian poetry came into existence. So with the Christianization of the English tribes on the arrival of St. Augustine's mission in England influenced the development of the Old English Christian poetry. So Christianization of the English tribes with the arrival of St. Augustine's mission in England. And this influenced the development of the Old English Christian poetry. Now, the themes of the Old English Christian poetry are drawn from the stories in the Bible and other theological texts. So, this is how the Old English Christian poetry came into existence during the Anglo-Saxon period. Now let's talk about the features of the Old English period. So let's talk about the features of the Old English Christian poetry. So Old English Christian poetry acquired features from the pagan past, acquired features from the pagan past, but the writers who composed it were Christian writers. The themes of those poems were usually religious and biblical accounts were infused with holy fervor. The surviving poems mostly have anonymous authorship. But as we discussed earlier, two names of poets, Caedmon and Cynewulf, has been preserved. Now let's discuss about Caedmon. So as we have already discussed that Caedmon is one of the earliest Old English poets. In the 8th century, there was a historian named Bede. This historian Bede has mentioned about Caedmon in his ecclesiastical history. So the historian Bede in his ecclesiastical history has mentioned about Caedmon, where he has described him as an illiterate herdsman who was in his dream. And in his dream, he was given the divine gift of poetry. He was summoned into the presence of the abbess Hilda of Whiteby, and then he became a monk, and afterwards he sang many biblical events. This historian Bede in his ecclesiastical history has mentioned the hymn that Caedmon had sung. Caedmon's poems are an amalgamation of the Anglo-Saxon aristocratic and heroic verse traditions with the Christian themes, and these were written in the Northumbrian dialect. So, Caedmon's poems are an amalgamation of Anglo-Saxon aristocratic and heroic verse traditions with Christian themes. And these were written in the Northumbrian dialect. So these are the important points of Caedmon's poetry. Now we'll discuss about the works of Caedmon. The works ascribed to Caedmon include Genesis A, Genesis B, Exodus, Daniel, and Christ and Satan. Now very briefly we'll discuss the works of Caedmon. So Genesis A, this is about Satan's rebellion against God. Genesis B centers around the temptation of Adam and Eve. Exodus tells the story of the escape of Bereans under the leadership of Moses. Daniel is about the 6th century Hebrew prophet. He spent his life as a captive at the court of Babylon. Now the last one, that is Christ and Satan. This is a combination of 3 shorter works. I'm writing the names. The first one is The Fall of Angels. The second is The Harrowing of Hell. And the third is The Temptation. So with this, we end the discussion of Caedmon. But one important thing that should be mentioned is that there is no substantial evidence to support the claim that Caedmon was the author of these works. Now we'll discuss the other poet, that is Cynewulf. There are 4 poems that contain the signature of Cynewulf in runic characters. The 4 poems are, first is Juliana, second is Ellen, third is Christ, and the fourth is the fates of the apostles. So the first one, Juliana, it is the first signed book of Cynewulf. There are other poems that have been ascribed to him, and the most important is The Dream of the Road, second is the Phoenix, and the third is Andreas. These poems are attributed to Cynewulf by the critics. In Cynewulf's poems, there is a greater power of expression, technique, and real descriptive powers. So this can be included within the features. Cynewulf's poems, the ideas are broader and deeper, and a certain lyrical quality is found. These were written probably in the 9th century. So with this, our Old English poetry is completed. So I am ending this video here. From the next day, from a fresh video, we'll start discussing the Old English prose. So if you think that this video has helped you in any way or the other, do like, share, comment and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.